This is the Unearthing Art Podcast with Michele and Beck Lee, where we dig into the messy reality of making art that matters, raw and real conversations about being an artist, navigating the creative process, and expressing our honest and sometimes weird selves.
The reason that I don't want to talk about this is because I feel that it's the same story as we've discussed in the past. So it's repetitive and boring.
So hold on a minute. Does that mean that anytime we have struggles, it's just like you're only allowed once per lifetime?
You're only allowed one struggle of that type, and then you need to fix it.
I'm in trouble.
And then you need to.
Okay. It's just, no, struggles I think are just, it's about, there's still something we're learning. That's what I think the struggles are there. They're there to teach us something, teach us a lot about letting go. I'm speaking for myself, but carry on.
It's all about letting go. Yeah.
Oh, Beck. What's going on?
I don't even know what's, like, you're like always saying, just tell me, Beck, just tell me what's going on. And I'm like, I feel like I'm trying to make 110 million decisions in my head before I do a single thing. And
that's a good way to stop yourself.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Yeah. Carry on.
I think that's a pretty good way to sum it up.
Can I tell you something that I've thought about this morning? Did you know that this is just a slight sidetrack, but when we have these wake ups in the middle of the night and our brain is like, lizard brain's going, this sucks, you're terrible at this, like, or is that just me, like, ever wake up and have these really terrible thoughts? Did you know that the brain is there's only the lizard brain that's awake, the rest of the brain is not working? So you're getting really bad advice from that, by the way, at 3 a.m. So anything that's going on at 3 a.m., just disregard, because it's not all your brain power.
Do you know, it's kind of the opposite for me. When I am falling asleep and I'm running, I often do, this is going to sound terrible, I often do problem solving as I'm trying to fall asleep.
As you do. I have to put on music so I don't, because I do find that my brain does try to go into that mode.
Somebody, was it Einstein? Somebody did something where they would think about problems and they would slowly fall asleep, like propped up in their chair, and then, but they'd have like, they'd hold like an apple in their hand or something heavy, like a heavy book, and then just as they drift off, they'd drop the book and it would bang and they'd wake up, and then they would have the idea because they wanted to use that little dream state. So I often do, as I'm drifting off, think that I've found the solution to all my problems. I'm like, when I wake up, I'll just go to the studio and I'll do that. And I guess maybe because I can imagine it, I can see it. Yep, that'll work great. And then I get up and it's the cold reality of canvas and paint does not want to cooperate with my beautiful half-dreamt vision of beauty. But I am at a state, I've got myself into a state where I'm not even sure like what I should be painting on. Like I'm going back and forth about whether it would be better to be using paper or canvas, because I'm having these debate in my mind around different effects and ways that the paint behaves, that I kind of want to have both.
I think that sounds, I know that you're in it and I'm not. So from my vantage point, I'm like, wow, that sounds like something that you can concoct and make happen, because that's, why not? I think you're literally just, really in the muck of, I say muck in like quicksand feeling. I'm laughing with you, but it's like you can't resolve it yet because you're literally in the middle of reconciling with these choices that you're making. Sometimes these technical things kind of also can hang us up when there's other work that we're, because if we're pouring out these other things that we're a little bit like, I don't know, then technical things can become like super helpful distractions as well.
Yeah, like ordering supplies, because if I have to decide, what I have spent time on art supply stores, looking at online, looking at the different options of paper and the different ways that I could do a thing.
Yep.
And imagining how that could work without actually having to make it work. And maybe I could become an imaginary artist, Michele. Do you think there's a market for that? Could I become, because I think I'm really good at imagining the art that I would like to exist in the world.
You're looking for the final answer. Beck, we're not in math class. There is no final right answer. You can change your mind. You can start with paper. You can work with canvas. You can try to do both. You can come to a new conclusion after that. Like, I think that the challenge we have as artists is that we think it's a static thing, that there's like a finish line of like that's the thing, where it's just an evolution of things, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It's definitely an uncertainty thing.
Being that now we can see you on video, there's some beautiful canvases behind her head. And if you're on the podcast, go check it out on YouTube, if she'll let us publish this episode.
Which she probably won't.
There's some beautiful mark making things that are in that. And how is what I consider like the other non-technical stuff going? The pouring of your heart, soul.
I think that's the problem. Is that what you expected to hear? Because I'm worrying about technical things, because I'm having troubles with that. I'm finding myself in a bit of a loop where, oh my goodness, this is so ridiculous. This is so ridiculous to say out loud.
We all have these things and thoughts.
You have certain pieces of work, certain little breakthroughs where you're like, oh, I can really see myself in that. Like, that feels very different. It's not just recreating what I've seen elsewhere. That feels distinctive in a way. Mm-hmm. And then I really struggle when I don't see that, and I get a bit grabby about it. And I'm like, where did it go? I can't find it.
Oh, so you think you're going to get there in one quick short swoop. One quick short swoop. So my advice is, are you okay if it doesn't ever come back?
No!
This is the weirdest thing someone's ever said to me, and I keep trying to put myself in that when this happens to me too, is that I think it's because we're so attached. We are freaking attached, like locked and loaded, like it's the desperation, and I'm saying this because I've felt that as well. It's the desperation that makes us feel so horrible about it, and then all of a sudden then the stories kick in, and it's like, see, I told you you couldn't do this, told you weren't cut out for this, told you this wasn't gonna work. It's just then the loop goes on, and like, well, and then look, now I can't even figure out if I should do canvas or paper. Just
I don't even know what color to pick anymore.
Exactly. I'm
losing my mind.
It's a spiral, and the reality is that's what uncertainty looks like. That's the hardest part of uncertainty. But I like to look at what you're going through as really like the breakthrough stage. And it feels like it should be a quick, like, let's just tick that off the list.
Breakthrough sounds very like, boom, like a rocket taking off, like, boom, done.
Yeah. But a real breakthrough, I think it just is an evolution. It's not a boom one. It's an evolution. And I think that it is the layering of these uncertain questions. But I guess my advice is to look at this and say, okay, I'm uncertain of this. Like, it's not working. What if I actually like let it go? What if I just say, okay, fine. You want to win? Like, just let it go. I know that sounds really easy from me being in my chair and I'm not in your chair. But I think that the fear of success also gets the best of us. Yeah. And feeling very exposed by these really big ideas And that is where I think that good old Seth says it the best. It's like that lizard brain is like, not going to go there, not going to let you. It's not going to happen. Sounded like a good idea, but definitely not.
So then you're kind of in a battle with yourself, aren't you?
Yes.
That's what it feels like.
I watched you go through this process, Beck. You were becoming your true self, and there's this shedding that's happening, and there's a lot of vulnerability, I think, that happens through that process. And, you know, I've definitely experienced that for myself. So I'm not saying like, oh, Beck, it's only Beck. I think that that's just really what happens when we start revealing these truer sides that we're like, oh, how's this going to work? I don't know. So I think that I wish I could say like I could give you through the screen, I'm just going to give you this happy pill that just solves everything.
Relax pill. Just relax.
Just relax.
Stop holding on so tight.
I think that it's I'd say being unattached to the outcome, but also really kind of stepping back from it, you know, and being a little bit of an outsider to it. Like I do this with my own stuff too. So I'm not saying it's just you, but I look at it and I'm like, is the problem really about that? Or that's just like an easy thing to look at because the harder stuff is over here. I think technical things can show up as a way to get us focused on something that also helps relieve the stress.
It does relieve the stress because it's a problem that you can work on.
Yes.
As you say, as opposed to a larger problem, which is what the hell am I doing?
And how am I going to be exposed? I think that a lot of the what the hell I'm doing is, I think we instinctively know what we could be doing, but I think that it's more of the feeling exposed when we really do that thing that makes us.
Could that be very subconscious? It's appealing to me, this battle with yourself. It's like a tug of war, you know, like you're saying the lizard brain is back there subconsciously tugging on the rope saying, no, come back. But
the front part's like, we can solve this in some other ways.
The problem?
We don't need to do this. Yep. I think that ultimately, and this is the part, I think one of the bigger challenges of really making authentic work is that there's this true vulnerability and exposed feeling that we have to hit face on. And I've seen that in any kind of work that I'm bringing to life, even in this podcast. You know, there's this like idea of like, oh, this is what it will be. And then there's the like, oh no, this is what it really feels like, you know, and getting through it as well. I guess, and moving forward in spite of things. And sometimes that looks like just sharing your work with people that you can trust. You know, I think that sometimes we want to go to these big finished ideas, and that's not the next step. The next step is getting comfortable with sharing.
What's coming up for me is that when you're talking about feeling exposed and vulnerable, and in terms of the ideas, I don't necessarily feel that, but being exposed in terms of showing ideas that are in baby stages or that aren't, as you say, complete and everything that I would hope they would be, being, you know, vulnerable to be a beginner. The image that's coming to my mind is, you know, to be paddling around in the mud making mud pies kind of thing. Like to show that messy, very beginning, unformed
and snippets,
messing about.
It's not not complete ideas. And the reality is like that's because that's the stage. That's the stage. And I think that making sure that you're sharing that with people that you feel safe with is in they're going to understand where you're at in that process. Because I think that one of the things, I go back to my experience with bigger companies, they have, you know, little divisions and groups of people who work on ideas that are kind of separate from bringing them to market. And that's to protect those ideas and let them develop in that undeveloped state that they're in.
Right.
So they get protected. So I think that we as artists have that same challenge where we have to have this little space that's kind of more of a protected, undeveloped stage where you can really hash out these ideas or flush out these ideas.
And we've talked about that before, that when you judge things too early, if you're looking at something that's a little baby idea and then you're like, well, how does that compare? Like, how does that test against other things? It can be shut down pretty quickly. It's really interesting that you say that there's that room for kind of baby ideas. And I think also when you talk about having a place to share those things, we don't often, there's not many of us, I think, who are born into an artist community and kind of get to see all those real life models. We often find ourselves drawn to art and then find friends and family, real life support systems who don't really understand or go through those same processes. How much do you think being alone in that process impacts us?
I think it's very dangerous, and I know that sounds very scary and sad, but I think that our imagination, which is so brilliant, but it will get the best of us if we stay alone with these ideas. And that's why bigger companies have teams of people. It's not like one person just is the idea person and they're by themselves. It's a team of people, and there's a reason that there's a team is because they're fleshing it out together. And so I think that it's very hard from my own experience, even with my supportive family. Like, there's a lot of stuff I've wanted to do that they just didn't get, they didn't get. And so I couldn't flush it out with them because they really weren't in the space to be open. Because I think when we're in groups or a community that allows us to flush out ideas, it's not that they always have the right answer, but it's to give you space, to hold space for you to flush it out loud. Because sometimes when we say it out loud or we share it and we have that heartfelt like you want to throw up because you just shared something that you're like, it's not ready. Oh, maybe that's me. Because in the end, I go back to that thing of like, you still are the only one who's going to know what you really want to make. No one can answer that for you. But there can be people around you that can hold that space for you to flush that through so that you can really validate the idea for yourself first, then, flush through what that could look like through various techniques. But I think that sometimes we're just that exposing ourselves is part of that exposing. I don't know if that's the best word. You're such a good word person, but do you know what I mean? There's this exposure that we have to have. There's this we have to reveal this side that maybe we haven't shown before, and we have to get comfortable with doing that. We kind of have to practice doing that.
Like if you're having these ideas and then all you've got is that little tug of war inside your own head of saying, oh, this is going to work, or this isn't going to work, you can within yourself find it very difficult to give things space to try out and see what happens. So if you have a community like other people, as you say, to say, here's a space, at least you've put it out there. And I think also what you said then about practicing, maybe it's, as you say, practicing that vulnerability, because if fear of vulnerability is keeping a certain amount of expression clenched up and tucked in, then if you've got a safe group that you practice with, then it can start to feel less scary because you've already shared it with 5 people and you didn't die, and then and then you shared it with like 10 people and you didn't die. So maybe lizard brain, I'm not gonna die.
That's the thing. I think when we practice that, then the lizard brain doesn't have as much power. But I think when you keep it to yourself, the lizard brain has 80% of the power in the conversation. So I think it's about dialing that puppy down and finding support in a way that you can quiet that and know that yeah, you're like, I did not die. Just sharing those little bits, that practice of that vulnerability, because when we come up with this like big kaboom, you think we're going to feel safe doing that?
It's a false promise, isn't it? It's a false promise that if you keep working at it, that you'll eventually find something that you will feel safe sharing, but it won't necessarily be the case. Another interesting thing about it, because I know that from working with you as an artist myself and you being a mentor, you have this way of doing this, dragging things out into the light, because you said, what have you been working on? I said, I've just been doing some things on paper and they're not very much of anything. And you said, I want to see. So I showed you and you're like, oh no, I really like those. And, there could be something. Pulling them out this week. And of course I love them now. It's great. At the time I was insistent to you that it was absolutely nothing.
See? And it's sometimes, this is the other thing that happens that I think is a real thing, is sometimes we get so upset with our art in that process because in our mind, it didn't do what we were wanting it to do. Like it didn't fulfill that imagination that we're like, oh, it could be this. And then it comes out differently. And we're so upset that we're like, shame on you, naughty you. Now I got to go off and solve it in another way. And then if we can just back off from that and like step outside of being so controlling and intimate. I'm not saying you're being controlling, but I'm saying
I think I am. I think you can say that I'm being controlling, Michele. As soon as you said that, I'm like, I am so controlling about this.
It's just unique. It's going to have a life of its own. It's bringing something to the table. The art is bringing something to the table that we can't control. And every time we try to control it, we get mad at it and we're like, shame on you. And we don't want to show it to anyone. We don't want to talk about it. And, and then the end.
And I'm mad that it's not more fun. Honestly, I'm mad that it's being difficult. I'm mad that I see other friends who are artists and I see them working in their studio and,
you think they got a big old happy face on?
And they're just having the best time.
Hold on a minute. Didn't we just talk about this comparison thing?
I really know, Michele. I really know that they're having the best time, honestly.
Oh, dear. See, it's a trick. It's a trick. I don't know. I think it's the letting go of control. Mm-hmm. And really letting it's think of it like we talked about this before, like it's a relationship, it's a real partnership of, you put your hands to things and things come out. But what happens through that, like it does bring something to the table. And I think that it's more about managing those expectations of, okay, I can imagine this is going to be like this, but it's probably not. So let's just see what happens. It's definitely letting go of all expectations. And even though I feel like a broken record when I say that, I just think that
I feel like a broken record coming to tell you that I feel really stuck and horrible. So,
but I don't think that you're alone. So I think it's a common thing. And I mean, I just think it happens all the time. The reason why that I just keep wanting to talk about it is because sometimes certain things click. Like sometimes you'll hear something and you'll go, oh, now I'm clicking to that, and it just takes time. But I think playing and just staying in that curiosity state, the challenge for you, and I'm saying for Beck right now, like in real time, is she wants a finished product. She so wants a finished product. She's like, give me the freaking finished product already. Am I right?
Oh my God, you're 100,000,000% right.
And the universe is saying, because here's what I think is really happening. I think there's some really cool stuff that you are still uncovering. It's still, you're still in the middle of like bubbling up some goodness that you just haven't yet discovered yet, because that's just the way it's working.
I'm so impatient.
It's hard. It's
frustrated. I want to flip to the end of the book and read the last 2 pages.
There's no end.
Oh no. There's nowhere to flip to. Oh, God.
There's no last 2 pages. There's only in the now of wrestling with the creative process, because it's like and I think that what I love, there's a pattern here, which is really good. You wrestle with it. You torture yourself. Not I'm saying that you should continue to torture yourself, but it doesn't work the way you think it's going to work.
Yeah.
But an outcome happens, a result happens, right? Saying to yourself, like, just step away, because it will start clicking. And I know I keep saying that, but you have uncovered some really juicy stuff that I just think there's more stuff that is developing there, and keep sharing that in a safe place. And, you know, occasionally when you want to share snippets of these paintings, you can let other people in and have a perspective. But what I would want to say about that is that even though we might like them, you know, ultimately you've got to come around to whether you actually care about them or not. You know, otherwise you're pursuing a painting you don't even want to do. You know, it doesn't matter if other people like it. It matters most if you really enjoy it. But I have noticed that sometimes we just need space to let them breathe.
When you're just not finding time, when you're just not getting to the studio kind of thing, when you're just not making any work, one of the big things I think to think about is, do I actually care about this? Because if you're really caring about something, you kind of want to get in there and you know, and I've had times like that when I've been like waking up like, oh, I can't wait to get in and start. I'm going to try a little something here and try a little something there. And then on the other side, and I don't know what you think about this, there's a kind of a school of thought that creatively there's benefit in showing up, even though the motivation might not be there on a particular day.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how those two things work together. You know, like, I guess I'm trying to find my compass.
Yeah, I think knowing what kind of work you've been doing in the last year, I think that you've started to discover some things that you really do care about, but I think they scare the living poop out of you. I think that's procrastination working as its finest masked. Procrastination and perfectionism can be just such a mask for the fear itself.
Yeah.
So with what you were saying, I think that showing up to the studio, even if it's a half an hour, an hour, just to tackle that discomfort of like, hey, I know we're not comfortable, but I'm here anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I just think it's like sometimes we want that big giant prize, and we're like so obsessed with the big prize that we forget like just showing up for 30 minutes or an hour of just like clocking on is a true help. You know, it really is lots of little steps.
Thanks, Michele.
Lots of steps. So did we help?
I think so. I'm going to relax, and I'm just going to have a bit of a potter and make just stick my hands in some paint and just remember how much I enjoy doing that.
That's the thing. I think that just constantly reminding ourselves, like, we enjoy it. Remember? Like Potter.
This is fun.
And when we have these big ideas or big projects or whatever, like, I just go Potter. Go Potter.
Yeah.
If pottering is the way that can get you in the studio every day, just book in like half an hour Potter session each
Potter
day.
time.
Potter time. Don't call it studio time. Call it Potter time.
I
Whatever
like that.
it takes. Because otherwise, it's just too much pressure.
Thank you, Michele.
See, it wasn't painful, was it?
It wasn't painful at all. I'm happy to say that this conversation and a chat with my artist group really helped loosen me up, relax, and reconnect with my feeling of creative possibility. And I had some follow-up insights about that, which we're going to be talking about next week. So I can confirm that, as we said in this episode, it is so powerful to have a place where you can safely air out these thoughts and vulnerabilities. Definitely look for those people and opportunities in your art life. And if you'd like to learn more about the online artist community that Michele and I support, the link for that is in the show notes. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.